Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Movie Mates video. I am Matthew, joined of course by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum,
Hey man, lovely to see you. So
good
on
to see you.
today's episode, we've got a bit of a different one by normal Movie Mates accounts because we're doing reports, so to speak. So Callum and I are each going to pick two sort of subject matters that will sort of mine kind of loosely tie into cinema. Callum's will probably tie in a bit more than mine will, but yeah, I'll pass over to Callum to explain more in detail about where this idea sort of comes from and why we kind of wanted to do this video. So off to you, bud. Off to you.
So hopefully we'll be doing this over the next 4 weeks. Me and Matthew both have two different topics picked out, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Matthew has to say. We're doing this in sort of the vein of one of my favorite podcasts, Do Go On, where every week they take a factual historical topic and they put a funny twist on it. And I don't know how much comedy is going to come here because it's sort of a different dynamic with just the two of us.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is going to be a very Matthew centric episode where we're just gazing into those big beautiful eyes.
Oh, it's so sweet.
I'll be chiming in, here and there, but really this is Matthew's episode. He's done the research and we're going to hear a lot from him. Presumably this is going to be, I mean, we always pitch it very very low
We
time
do.
wise, where it was like
We do.
quick 15 minutes. I
Yeah.
imagine this is going to be in the vein of like 40 to an hour.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's
I've
be
got
honest.
3.5 pages here of the report, but I'm really excited for this. Of course, I'll link Do Go On in the description for people to check it out. I really highly recommend you do. From the couple of episodes I've watched, it's really hilarious and it's really actually informative. Like you get a lot of good
Yeah.
trivia out of that. So yeah, I'll link that down below. And yeah, next week we'll do it alternatively. So this week it's my report. Next week it'll be Callum's first report, and then yeah, you guys know the drill. So for the next month, we've got weekly content as well in the form of reports, which we hope you guys enjoy as well. So just before we kick off today's episode, thanks very much for everyone who supported our latest podcast episode, Superhero Film Characters We Could Beat Up. That was a blast to record, a really fun one. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a funny one. But yeah, I hope you
We,
guys are
we,
safe and
we
well
got a
again.
we got a few new subscribers as well.
We did, yeah, yeah. A shout out to Rachel from work if you're listening. Thanks for subscribing. I actually don't know the other people who subscribed, but thank you very much to those people as well. We appreciate that massively. So we do massively. So, um, but yeah, so my report is one that I said to you, Callum, that I think you may have heard of, and
Matthew, but before we get into it,
yeah.
do you have a question prepared to get us onto the topic?
Well, I had actually thought of that, but I'll work off the brain now. So I'm trying to think of a question. In the terms of question, do you mean like something that'll lead us on to what we're going to be talking about?
Something that may allow me to guess the
Okay.
topic, and then if I haven't heard of it, we'll let you just introduce it.
Okay. Well. Oh, okay. Well, obviously we've seen with Marvel Disney Plus shows, okay, they're going to go a lot of different ways, especially with Loki. Now, if we've seen the Loki trailer to the viewers and Callum, we'll see that the God of Mischief is assuming a certain role, which is iconic with American criminal lore in that sense. So I was wondering, are you familiar with plane hijackings?
Well, Do Go On has actually done an episode about this, so I'm very familiar with
Oh
this
no,
topic.
have they actually?
Yeah,
Oh well, oh well. But it's the
yeah,
disappearance of DB Cooper. Now you're definitely aware of this, of course. And
I'm
I
very
actually didn't.
very
This is
familiar.
embarrassing. I didn't know Did go on to episode this. But yeah, for any of viewers who haven't listened, this is the disappearance of DB Cooper. So obviously, this very loosely ties in with the Loki TV show, which of course, shows him as the man in question. And yeah, so I've just got a little bit of a background on the hijacking and things like that. Hopefully some of the things from the Do Go On episode have escaped your head for a little bit, so that some of this might be fresh information. I highly doubt it because you've got an amazing memory, but nonetheless,
Yeah, I've
I'll
listened to it
try.
probably 6 times.
Oh man.
But I'm hoping that off the back of it, we maybe discuss some theories that weren't covered.
Yeah, I think so. So it starts on the evening of November 24th, 1971, in which a middle-aged man was carrying a black case and approached the flight counter at an airport in Portland. He identified himself as Dan Cooper, for those who don't know, and he used cash to purchase a one-way ticket to flight 305, which was a trip to Seattle. Now, lo and behold, he got on the plane, everything was fine, and he was sort of like dressed in Men in Black style attire for people who aren't familiar with the case. And shortly after takeoff, he hands a note to this flight attendant and says, and basically it says, I've got a bomb, yada, yada, yada. Look at this note. I'm hijacking this plane. So, like, the note was apparently printed in felt tip capital writing, and it was, but of course, he reclaimed it later on. So it's not exactly known what was actually on the note. But yeah, once this flight attendant, who was called, I think her name was Schaffner, something Schaffner, Florence Schaffner was her name. Cooper told her to sit beside him. She did as requested, then quietly asked to see the bomb. Now, one thing that actually strikes me about that is like that takes some serious some serious balls to ask for that, because like if I'm in a plane that's getting hijacked, that wouldn't be my first question. It's kind of a very like sinister thing to do, isn't it? Like to sort of involve the flight attendant, isn't it? Like it's kind of a really weird thing to do. It was quite unusual, wasn't it?
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, I struggle to speak to people on a normal basis, let alone when crime is in the background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm exactly the same. And I remember like any time you and I have shared a plane together, we haven't sat beside each other in the plane just because of the nature of the group, and it was quite a large group. But yeah, like plane journeys when you're on your own can be quite awkward, I suppose, can't it, as well?
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, almost nothing scares me more than the idea of a stranger speaking to me on a plane. The idea of being closed in and being forced to speak to anyone. Taxi drivers, people on the bus. I mean, we have ridden the bus together, of course, and had some uncomfortable encounters. With some colorful characters from my neighborhood. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we have actually.
it
Yeah,
is a
that's a good
good
point.
thought,
Yeah,
if I'm honest.
yeah. But yeah, especially because planes are so like enclosed as well. Like plane bathrooms are like one of my worst nightmares, honestly. But anyway, so basically, after opening the briefcase and closing the briefcase with the bomb inside, Cooper stated his demands, which was $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes as well, and then a fuel truck standing by Seattle where the flight was due to land to refill the aircraft upon arrival, which I suppose would suggest that he had other plans on travel after that. So Schaffner, the flight attendant, conveyed these instructions to the pilot, and which he was informed. So basically, the flight crew had sort of noted that DB Cooper was quite aware of how plane operations work, with the science behind it and stuff, which I find quite interesting, because there is a few theories as to whether he was a paratrooper or like a pilot himself and stuff like that. So it kind of got me thinking, if he was in the in the Air Force, something, it would give a motive for him to do this kind of crime, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because I've been watching a lot of stuff recently, to do with sort of life after war and things like that. With ex-soldiers, maybe considering that the U.S. government has maybe left them behind and they don't feel
Yeah.
supported after the war. So it is possible that he was perhaps because this was the which decade was this?
I think it was early 70s, so 1971.
So that would have been post-Korean War, in
Yeah.
and around where the start of the Vietnam War started. So I think it's fully possible that it was maybe a vengeful anti-government kind of thing. You would think
So.
though, if he were a professional paratrooper, he would dress a bit more logically for his eventual
Yeah, instead of
plans.
like a suit and tie. Yeah, I know, it's quite strange, but yeah, I think our sort of consensus agrees, because the flight attendant Tina Mucklow recalled that the man Cooper appeared familiar with the local terrain. At one point, he remarked that it looked like Tacoma down there, which as the aircraft flew above it, indicating you knew the area and stuff like that. And yeah, Florence Schaffner, also a flight attendant, described him as calm, polite, and well spoken, which was sort of not at all consistent with the stereotypes of like a hijacker at a plane. Whenever I think of a plane hijacker, in movies or TV shows, you kind of think of a very aggressive sort of individual who, like, you must comply with, their demands at all times, otherwise you'll face the consequences, which is of course what happened here. But obviously this man was quite, like, they described him as a gentleman, which I find quite odd. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it kind of feels like he was just doing this as a hobby kind of thing. Like he wasn't actually seriously wanting to harm anyone, which I find strange.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're considering committing such a violent crime, or at least the threat of committing such a violent crime,
Hmm.
you probably have to be of two mentalities. Either just like a genius who wants money, or completely psychotic. So it really seems like he's of the former,
Yeah,
and that
it does,
he's
doesn't it?
just after the money. Because I mean, he as you said, he was very polite to everybody. So I mean, clearly he's not there, to be a terrorist. And I
Yeah,
feel that he had no intention of blowing anyone up. He just wanted money.
I
So do you
agree.
think there was a sense of desperation there?
I think so, and also the fact that I found really quite strange is that the flight crew actually said, he ordered some soda and some food, and he actually paid for it with his own tab, and he offered to buy crew for the flight crew as well. Which obviously this guy's quite clearly like, he's trying to perceive this identity that he is a nice gentleman and stuff like that. Obviously the attire, he's quite formal, quite formally dressed and stuff, which it kind of gets me thinking, like, obviously it would strike me that this is like a character he's trying to present. Like, obviously if he needs 200,000, there would probably be easier ways to go about getting 200 grand without hijacking an airplane. Do you know what I mean? Which probably would suggest that he had background in that area.
Yeah, because I think unless you're incredibly confident that you can successfully commit the crime, you would either
Yeah,
go for a lower scale one, or you would ask for more money.
yeah,
You don't commit
yeah,
such a
exactly.
high profile crime and then ask for $200,000. I mean,
Yeah,
at the time that was probably in the realm of a couple of million, but
yeah,
still,
yeah.
like for that many lives, I
It's
feel
just such
like,
for inflation. Yeah.
if they're willing to give you that amount of money, they're also willing to give you a lot more. Like, if they're not willing to just shoot down the aircraft, and they are going to comply with your demands, up it a little
Yeah,
bit.
no, absolutely. It kind of got me thinking as well, buddy. Like, if you were gonna hypothetically, obviously, we never rob anyone, but
Of
hypothetically,
course.
if you were gonna achieve, or sorry, rather acquire $200,000, what would you do these days? Like, how would you go about it if you had to be a criminal mastermind and plan that? Hypothetically, of course.
Hypothetically, I don't know, because I mean, you know, I feel like, with the internet being monitored, so highly these days, and sort of cameras everywhere, I feel like crime has become increasingly difficult.
It
Like,
has.
I'm
It
really
absolutely
surprised.
has.
There are obviously, I would say, in history, masses of cases, where these criminals are end up apprehended, or and end up dying, for
Yeah.
their cause,
No. Yeah.
or
Absolutely.
for their crimes. And
Hmm.
I feel like, had I been born 100 years ago, I I don't think I would have been a criminal, but I feel like being a criminal was very, very easy. Like, I
Oh,
feel like
absolutely, absolutely,
the
mate.
standards are so low.
Yeah, for sure.
Before the days of guns, I honestly don't know how crime wasn't, more rampant than it was. But these days, I feel like monitoring is too difficult to do any research into.
Hmm.
I feel like you need to be a trained professional expert,
Oh, you do.
in,
Absolutely
say,
do.
bomb making, to actually be able to do it. Because I feel like, if even if you like check something out of the library, they have an online record of it. So I do feel like crime
Hmm.
is on a different level of difficulty these days. So I,
Yeah.
I genuinely don't think I'm capable of it. Like, do you think in any way
No,
you could
no, I'm
ramble
exactly the
to
same.
$200,000 together?
I'm exactly the same. I think because everything is, everything is digital as well these days. Like you said, library is an example. It's increasingly more difficult. And I think it goes to show, like, when you think about, notorious, like, crimes committed by people, it is becoming more and more common for that individual to be like a former member of the police force, for example. Obviously, so in that sense, I mean, the Golden State Killer, for example, who was an ex-policeman, of course he would have methods that would sort of evade that type of policing because he was in the police himself. He would know methods that the police couldn't detect or would struggle to identify him, so that's why he got away for so long. And I think because methods of identification are so technologically advanced these days. I don't think, if this crime was committed today, I don't think the DB Cooper of today would get away with it at all. Like, it's impossible,
No,
absolutely impossible, isn't it?
no, yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, once again, I've started a sentence and I don't know where it's going, so I'm just going to throw it back to you, Matthew.
Well, okay. Well, back to the actual hijacking. So once the plane had landed in Seattle to be refueled, every passenger was actually evacuated off. So that would sort of obviously suggest he didn't want to hurt anyone. So all the passengers were exited the plane, and it was just him and the flight crew. So basically, refueling had happened, and then the flight Cooper outlined the flight plan to the cockpit crew, which was a southeast course towards Mexico City. However, the aircraft's range was limited to this, so it couldn't actually achieve the journey to that state. To that city. So Cooper and the crew discussed options and agreed to a place in Nevada. So as the refueling stop. So the plane took off, 5 people on board, just obviously himself and the flight crew. And things had progressed. He reacquires the car that he had given to Florence Schaffner, and then acquires 2 parachutes, and then jumps out of the plane once he has been signaled that his demands have been met. So it's quite an interesting one, because I think I had read somewhere that the 2 parachutes he picked were like the 2 worst ones he could have picked out of the 4. One of them was like an old military one, and the other one was just a decoy. So in essence, he just picked one parachute, which would kind of suggest to me that maybe he isn't as as expertise in that in that realm of aerospace and things like that. Maybe he isn't an expert as investigators first thought, which I thought was interesting, because it could just be a red herring to the police, couldn't it, that he wants you to think that he's not an expert even though he is.
Yeah, and in that he asked for 4 and he used 2 in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I suppose it could equally be that he's maybe he wanted them to be concerned that he potentially wanted to take hostages. If there were four parachutes and only him using them in the end, I suppose them giving him a decoy one is crazy though, because I mean
risky.
that easily could have killed a hostage.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I think the fact that he, asked for 4 but only took 2, like you were saying, buddy, along those lines, that he might have wanted to take a hostage, but then, maybe otherwise decided against it, which is interesting. But, lo and behold, this man is wanted by the FBI, of course. FBI agents recovered 66 fingerprints on the airliner, and they also found DB Cooper's tie for his suit, the tie clip, and then, of course, the other 2 of the 4 parachutes. So they interviewed a lot of people in Seattle, Portland, the nearby cities, but nothing really came of it, apart from they had a series of composite sketches from people who were on the plane at the time with him, and they're really detailed composite sketches. What I'll put one of them in the thumbnail for sure. It's a very distinct. It's a very distinguishable.
He's a bit of an egg-shaped head.
He looks very similar to the Zodiac Killer, I think, to be honest with you, buddy, doesn't he? If you've seen that, if you've seen that composite sketching, it's interesting because obviously it's very unlikely they're linked. It's incredibly unlikely, but the fact that they happen within, I think, 6 years of each other, and of course, Seattle's not too far away from California. It's on that west coast, so it's a very unlikely theory that they're connected, but they do look remarkably similar, I think, which is interesting. But
yeah, I mean, I suppose there is the idea that not a lot of criminals like to be that high profile. The reason that you only hear of some serial killers is that it's a very small percentage of them that sort of like playing that cat and mouse game with the police. So I mean, I suppose that there could easily be a link. I mean, not necessarily between these 2 sort of series of crimes, but they're definitely between sort of one high profile criminal and another.
Yeah, absolutely, dude, for sure. And so a month after the infamous hijacking, the FBI distributed lists of all the ransom serial numbers for the $200,000 worth of cash. So they distributed these to like casinos, racetracks, just in case they could track it that way, and so on. So the physical description of DB Cooper remained unchanged and is reasonably considered reliable. And sort of like we were saying, it's a very specific look about him. Do you know what I mean? Like he obviously the sketches all look similar. There's I've mentioned the Golden State Killer before. If anyone's seen any of his composite sketches, they all look different. I think that's because he was always changing his look. From one year he had a mustache, one year he shredded loads of weight to get really lean. It's one of those ones. So yeah, the overall consensus from the flight crew was about 5'10", 82 kilos. That's about 180 pounds, and then mid 40s with sort of dark, slick back hair, and swarthy skin as well. So that was the general description of him. And then the later suspects, which we'll go through, a lot of them do look quite similar to him. But I suppose the big breakthrough in the case was that on Sunday, February 10th, 1980, an 8-year-old kid called Brian Ingram was on holiday with his family in Columbia River and near a place called Tina Bar, about 9 miles from Washington. And he uncovered 3 packets of the ransom cash, which DB Cooper had stolen. Now, this was interesting because I think the investigators had sort of came to the consensus that it was either purposely placed there or someone else had placed it there other than DB Cooper, like maybe an animal had randomly picked it up and put it there, which I think is interesting because it kind of would suggest that he survived it, wouldn't it?
Because it was buried, wasn't it?
It was buried there. It was buried there for sure. And I'm trying to think, yeah, but the bills were disintegrated, it said, but still bundled in rubber bands, which was, yeah. So it was 2 packets of $120 bills each and a third packet of 90, which were all arranged in the same order as when given to him, which would suggest that he never used them. So maybe money wasn't the motive, and it would sort of maybe stand to reason that it was just like a hobby for him, or just like a, maybe
Just
not
for
a hobby is
bands.
the right word. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Just for that creative excitement or something, which is even more insane, isn't it? That's
yeah,
mad.
because I mean, obviously he didn't want to kill anyone. He wanted to get out of there alive, so he didn't want to kill himself or other people
Yeah.
seemingly.
Mm-hmm.
And he saved himself. Although I suppose we can talk about whether we believe that he
Yeah.
potentially is still alive,
Yeah.
or if
We'll
he
talk
even
about that later
survived
on. Yeah, for
survived
sure.
the fall. But
Yeah.
yeah, it does sort of stand to reason. I think that was placed there as a decoy because if you're looking to have that money, you're going to use it. So either he didn't. I agree with you that either he didn't bury it there, or it was, or it was there as a decoy. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know who he thinks he's tricking. I mean, I suppose you
Yeah. I
you
know.
bury it there and then run the other direction. But
Yeah.
I don't really know.
I know.
They still need to find it there in the first place, which I
Mm-hmm.
imagine it took several years. So I mean, it's
It
not
did.
like
Yeah, 9 years after they caught
it's not
him.
like they'd be it's not like they found it the night after and went, oh, he's somewhere around here.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
They
Yeah. Exactly.
oh, multiple years ago he landed somewhere near here.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't prove anything.
It's not very
Yeah.
good decoy.
Yeah, it isn't. Yeah. And so, yeah, like we were sort of saying, investigators thought his financial situation was likely quite desperate. So, um, alternatively, though, people sort of suggest that this dude could have been a thrill seeker, merely just that, who just, did this just for the hell of it, just to prove it could be done, so to speak. But yeah, one thing I find really interesting as well, which kind of links into our mutual passion of comic books, is that agents
Mm.
theorized that DB Cooper took his alias from a Belgian comic book series in the 1970s,
Oh.
which featured the fictional hero called Dan Cooper, who was a Royal Canadian Air Force paratrooper. And if you see some of these comics, dude, I'm sure you have, if you're aware of the case. There's loads of covers with this character Dan Cooper just jumping out of planes and stuff, from the stairway. So it's very possible that could be the link because Dan Cooper, although they were never translated into English, they were found in Canada, and obviously DB Cooper had said that he wanted the money in negotiable American currency, which would kind of suggest that he's not from there. Otherwise, why would you specify that? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
it's kind of a similar situation. Like, if we were going to do this, we wouldn't specify for 200,000 British pounds. We just say 200,000 pounds. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of an unusual detail.
Yeah.
But
And I mean,
yeah,
presumably because they found his accent like unnoteworthy. I guess they didn't say he's from a different country. He may well have been using a different accent, which I
yeah,
think is perfectly logical. I don't know if you've heard of the Dumb and Dumber Bandits,
I haven't. No, I
but they were
haven't,
sort of
mate.
there were two Australian teenagers who were vacationing in America, and I think their visas were about to expire, so they decided to like pull this heist on their local bank. But they were just like they had apparently very discernible frames, and they were using like they had like heavy Australian accents,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they were identified immediately. Like
yeah.
they went because it was their local bank that they would like frequent. So the bank tellers were like, "Oh, it's the two of you,"
Yeah, yeah,
and they were
exactly.
they
Yeah,
were
one of
still
those
wearing
ones.
their name tags from work, so they were identified immediately. But I mean, if I went into a bank right now and was like screaming, orders at the people there, like I wouldn't be using my normal accent.
Yeah, no, exactly. You'd want to disguise as much as possible, and it's such an interesting one, buddy, because I think there's a million different directions you could go down with this one. The paratrooper theory stands up with the comic books and the awareness of that kind of industry, wherein the fact that he didn't use the money would maybe suggest that it was just for the hell of it, to prove that it could be done, so to speak. But yeah, so in terms of suspects, then, you know, the FBI had, you know, composited a list of a lot of different people that sort of suggested that yes, it's likely that, you know, although, you know, the time at which he jumped out, you know, it would have been in the middle of a forest. It wouldn't be impossible for him to, you know, have not survived that. You know what I mean? Like it could have been either way. You know, it's one of those ones. Of course, at 1971, you know, the police work and, you know, the technology wasn't as it is now, so it's hard to compare it to our standards. But yeah, the four suspects that I've noted down are probably the ones that stuck out to me the most. So the first one is a guy called Robert Rackstraw. Now, this guy was a former paratrooper. He had experience with explosives as well. He had a criminal record and had an uncle named John Cooper who enjoyed skydiving as a hobby. However, he was ruled out because he was only 28 at the time, which was deemed too young, as we said earlier in this episode. Mid 40s was the consensus for him. But I find that quite interesting when, you know, investigators rule out people based on physical descriptions and stuff like that, because just because he's 28, he could have just been an old looking 28-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of
you've lived a rough life if you look in your mid 40s by 28.
yeah, so you don't, yeah. But do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of interesting. Like, people can very easily, you know, disguise their identity. You know, I remember on Netflix the Ted Bundy tapes. It's check that out if you haven't watched that, viewers. You know, I think it's really good. I remember there was one time like a victim was asked to pick him out of a lineup, and he had that. The only thing different in Ted Bundy's appearance was that he had swept his hair over to the other side, and that made him look really different. So it's kind of those things where people change their looks and then they become like a different person. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really interesting one. But yeah, the second one, Kenneth Christensen. Now, he was a paratrooper, ex-paratrooper, I think in Vietnam, or something, or maybe the Korean War. I think maybe you were saying. This guy was a flight attendant as well, which is really interesting. He was 45 and he had $200,000 in his bank account after the incident. However, he did not match the physical description.
That quite suspect.
Yeah, and it is quite suspect, but when I researched it, it sort of said he did not match the physical description, and also apparently he had acquired the $200,000 with legal means, so that kind of ruled that out. But everything else, you know, paratrooper, flight attendant, 45, that sounds pretty promising, but yeah, he was ruled out. Third one on my list, the penultimate one, was Richard McCoy, who hijacked a Boeing 727, the same plane here, in 1972, so the year after this event. He used a pseudonym as well. He used explosives, used 4 parachutes like DB Cooper, used notes that he had written himself, and was an ex-Vietnam demolitions expert, which is interesting. However, he was only 29 at the time, and they had said he was, although there was a lot of similarities, a lot of the stuff was quite different to DB Cooper, so he was ruled out. Yeah. But like you said, buddy, so sounds very promising as well, doesn't it?
Sort of like, yeah, but to you, does that sort of scream more like copycat? Like, copycat, you know, if he can do it, I can do it too. You know, if he's just doing this as like a thrill-seeking scenario, me, an expert, can do it better. But presumably, if they knew his name, he was caught then, presumably.
Yeah, he was caught in 1972. Yeah, Richard McCoy. And the fourth suspect on my list, he sounds the most promising for me. His name was William Smith. Now, this man was 43 at the time. He had a military background, and the interesting thing here is he's the only suspect that I could find who actually has a motive for the crime. So his employers were made bankrupt the year prior, which would give reason for him to acquire some money. And so he lost his pension and other funds he would have received in the time afterwards. But he lived quite far away at the time, was the only issue there. But I think it's really interesting because, like we sort of said earlier in the episode, buddy, there's a lot of different angles you could go down here. And I'm interested to hear your sort of theory or your kind of verdict on what kind of happened here, because that's the main crux of these sort of crime sort of podcasts and stuff, isn't it? And crime Netflix shows. You know, you always want to find out, you know, what someone's theory is or what actually happened. So where's your head at, bud, in relation to this? You know, out of all the podcasts you've heard and stuff, where's your head at?
Yeah, William Smith actually sounds like a real contender. You know, for the prize of being DB Cooper, I guess.
Doesn't he? Yeah. The prize.
Yeah, you know, I think it sort of doesn't scream to me, you know, that he was potentially he's professionally trained, but maybe as, you know, like in a skydiving school, or, you know, maybe he himself was a pilot or a flight attendant. So, you know, sort of suspects that line up with that, you know, seem to scream more to me than him being a professional paratrooper, because I do think you would know better than to jump out of a plane wearing a suit. Because
Yes, it's odd. It's
when
very
you're
odd.
that high up, like you may freeze to death. The rain, the temperature
Hmm.
of the sky mixed with the clothes does not scream expert to me. I
Hmm.
feel like if you're requesting parachutes, you could also request like a jumping suit.
Hmm.
So it screams to me that he knew a lot about planes, but not a lot about jumping out of them.
Yeah,
So I
that's a
feel
really
like
good point. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like a pilot or a flight attendant, as a career is potentially more likely. I on the sort of side of whether he was just a thrill seeker, it definitely does not scream to me that he was there for terrorism. It didn't seem like he wanted to scare people.
Hmm.
It seemed
Agreed.
he seemed
Agreed.
very calm and collected, which is either that he needed the money, but was able to sort of shut off that level of desperation, or he was just a complete psychopath who was just
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just able
Yeah,
to
that's
stay
true.
calm and collected whilst committing this. I mean, legally, it is an act of terrorism. To sort of call in a bomb threat, but that didn't seem to be his intention. But I don't know. How do you feel about it? Like, I don't know that he necessarily was there for the thrill because, I mean, it seems too high. Like, the amount of money seems too low for that crime, but too high to, suggest that he didn't actually care about the money.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I actually think that the value of the money is the really important thing here because I think if you're going to do a crime like that, buddy, to that when you're risking your own life for that kind of crime, an instance where you're either robbing an elderly person's house who has a lot of money, or robbing a house. Like this is a crime where when you're leaving the crime scene, you could die. You're jumping out of
Mm.
thousands of feet in the air. It's that kind of seriousness. And I actually think $200,000. It's hard to say because I actually don't know if that was a lot at the time. I assume it was, but it seems quite low for that kind of crime, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean that would be over $1 million now, but
Yeah.
it just does seem to me that if you asked for 400,000, they wouldn't be like, oh wow, now he's getting unreasonable.
Yeah, exactly.
The unreasonable part
Exactly.
about the
Yeah.
crime isn't the amount of money
Yeah.
requested; it's the fact that you have a bomb on an airplane.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I think what you're saying, buddy, about his profession, either a pilot or a flight attendant, I think that stands to reason. That's probably true for me anyway. I think probably a flight attendant at the time, maybe, and that would maybe suggest that yes, he does have certain expertise in that field, but maybe not as competent as say a paratrooper or a pilot, for example. But I think maybe flight attendant, and in regards to like the thrill seeker kind of doing it just to prove it could be done scenario, I think I think that definitely has weight to it. I definitely think it does, but I just think this crime is so odd in the sense that it's clear, like you said, he's not necessarily in my mind, he's not necessarily a terrorist because a terrorist, in my brain, obviously this isn't the general consensus, but in my brain, a terrorist is someone who wants to cause direct harm to people to achieve their goal. Whereas this guy,
Yeah.
obviously, he wanted the crew, he wanted the passengers evacuated, and he offered to pay for food, for hot meals for the crew. So he's obviously not maybe a dangerous guy, for example. But the fact that he took a lot of his equipment with him afterwards, he doesn't want to be identified. I think he definitely has, expertise and maybe proficiency in that area. And I definitely think he survived it. I definitely think he did.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah, but I really don't know, buddy, because like we sort of said, I mean, I've said this loads of times. There's a million different ways you could go down here, but
yeah.
yeah, I think it's an
Yeah, the
interesting one.
crime definitely is an act of domestic terrorism, but I don't think that his goal was to create terror.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
you
I
know,
absolutely agree.
probably to the letter of the law, he is a terrorist, but probably his intentions probably don't reflect that.
Yeah. I think maybe the captain and the crew were probably thanking their lucky stars when he was kind of not asking for, or sorry, not asking, but not committing more violent acts. I think when you compare it to other terrorist acts committed on plane hijackings, it could have got a lot more serious than that. And obviously this crime was very serious. $200,000 is an incredible amount of money at the time. But I'm just glad no one really got hurt in that scenario that we know of anyway. So but yeah, any more concluding remarks from you, buddy, before we wrap up?
Well, yeah, I am in agreement with you over the fact that I don't think he died either, because it does sort of stand to reason that his body would have been found, because
Yeah,
unless you've
absolutely.
been murdered and buried and sort of hidden, in a
Absolutely.
forest or something, a body, especially if they fall into water, will wash up somewhere.
Hmm.
And especially if you add sort of the layer that people are actively looking for his body,
Yeah.
I find it ridiculous that
Yeah.
they wouldn't. wouldn't discover
Exactly.
it. So
Yeah.
it does seem that he would have survived. How many years on is it now? It was
50.
1971.
I
So
think it's
that's
50. This
yeah,
year will
it's
be the 50th anniversary of it. So
50
you'd
this
bound to
year.
think you'd
So
find him. You wouldn't you? You'd think you'd find his body even if he did
well, I'm
die.
just thinking he'd probably be nearing 94, 95. Do you think he's still kicking?
I don't know. I don't know because I'd probably say he'd probably be deceased now if he was still alive. It's really
Mm,
it's an interesting one. This case really reminds me of the escape from Alcatraz prison in the 60s,
yeah.
with the Clarence brothers and oh, what was his name? I think it was something Morris or something like that. Frank Morris. It's really interesting because I think they would have been a similar age to him as well. So it's an interesting one. But um, I think I think it's a really interesting one. Obviously, we'll see the Loki TV show. We'll try to include it as well, hopefully, which would be interesting to see as well. But yeah, let us know in the comments, guys, your theories or your verdicts on this. We actually love to hear them, and we hope you guys enjoy this sort of like different style of video. Really enjoyed it. I'm sorry, man. I'm gutted. I apologize that I was
No,
gutted
no,
to go on to an
it was
episode.
different. It was
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
Because the with theirs it was more a focus on the event, but I think here there was more a balance of the event itself and the aftermath. So it was different. I assure you. But
oh, thank you.
I feel like if we're gonna get an answer on this, I actually do think it will be in the next few years. Because sort of with the well, you've mentioned the Golden State Killer a few times. Obviously he was nearing nearing death, and he'll probably be if
Yeah, mid
the state
70s,
where
yeah, I
he's tried
suppose.
in I mean he is currently in prison, but I feel like
Yeah,
the death penalty may if because I feel like there's been rumblings of the death penalty maybe being abolished, but
yeah,
I feel like if anyone currently in America is potentially going to face the death penalty, if it's within the state that he's currently in, I feel like it's not unlikely.
yeah,
I mean, so I just feel that as criminals sort of reach their older age, they either become sloppier or they
absolutely.
become like sloppier with sort of the information or with the crimes if they're still committing them. So
Yeah, it's a good
he
point. Really good
he's
point.
he's in his 90s, isn't he? The Golden State Killer,
Golden
80s or
State Killer's
90s.
he's actually in his early 70s, mid 70s. And the thing
Oh
with his
fuck!
case
All
is
right, okay.
he actually
He
got
just looks old as shit.
no, he does. Yeah, he absolutely does. And it's one of the things where in his case he actually pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. I think so.
Ah,
He got off of that one. I think so. It's a really interesting one because I actually think you're right. I think if we're going to find an answer to this one, it will be in the next 5 to 10 years because obviously we've mentioned technological advancements. There's bound to be some sort of scientific technology created which can analyze those latent fingerprints found in the plane. 66 of them is a lot of fingerprints, so you'd think one of them would at least they'd strike gold with at least one of them, with a lot of averages, so to speak. But
mhm.
it's one that really captivates me because I actually almost not enjoy it, but like I'm more captivated by crimes that are unsolved where you kind of think,
He
oh,
loves it.
I absolutely love crime
He
podcasts.
loves it when they get away.
I do. I love it. I love it. But like crime podcasts or TV shows or movies where like the culprits are unidentified or disappeared or something. I actually really find it
Yeah,
really interesting, especially this case. He could be in jail for all we
yeah,
know, like for a different crime. It's one of those
yeah.
ones where it stands to reason that it's not out of the realm of possibility. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, everybody just seems to love a mystery, and
yeah, absolutely.
I feel like for some reason the teenagers of our current generations just for some reason just love true crime.
Yeah,
You
it
know, it
is.
is
Yeah, something about
something
it, isn't
that's
it?
like
It's really
seen a
captivating.
resurgence in like the last few years. I mean, it's obviously like adults who are providing the content, but I feel like teenagers for some reason are really receptive to it.
Yeah,
People that you wouldn't
absolutely.
expect, are like, oh yeah, I really love that new murder documentary.
Yeah, no,
It is
literally, but
it is sort of shocking to see
absolutely.
how many
Yeah,
people enjoy that.
so true.
And
It's so true.
it's shocking to me. You say the ones where the criminal got away interest you more, but it's just shocking to me that people at the time would also like champion criminals that got away. Like
Yeah.
Bonnie and Clyde.
It's a
Killed
really
like
yeah.
several. Killed like several law enforcement officers. And yet, people were still like, "Oh yeah, they're the people's heroes." I'm like,
Yeah.
they're not Robin Hood. They're not like, they're not
Yeah.
stealing on your behalf. They're murdering innocent people.
Yeah. But mate, do you recall the Unabomber case from I think it was the 90s or 80s? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember reading a few articles on that where like a lot of people were not necessarily championing him, but they were kind of like supportive of his goal. You know, I think his name was Ted Kaczynski. You know, that this guy was all for, against technology, against that sort of industrial sort of revolution and industrial effect in society, especially in the environment. So but yeah, I think he definitely took, like, on paper that does sound like a very morally just argument. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
protecting the environment, but obviously this dude took it way too far, with violent
Yeah,
acts and
when you
stuff.
start murdering innocent
Yeah,
academics,
yeah,
just for trying to,
absolutely.
inform the world, yeah, you've
You
become a
failed there.
sick
Yeah,
person.
you do. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think obviously this was a report in a case you were very aware of, but I hold faith for my next one, because I think that one might be a little bit more original and new for you. So and it links to
I mean,
movies so a lot more.
I feel like it's, as good a potential discussion, because I mean, the fact that I knew a little bit more about it than I expected to, I think led to maybe, more a balanced level of knowledge
Yeah,
where we were able to, discuss theories a bit more. So,
yeah.
it feels, it was
That's good, mate.
uh,
I'm happy to hear
as
that.
good a conversation as I think we would have had regardless.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it, buddy. Is there more concluding points from you, bud, regarding the DP Cooper case?
No, nothing else from me.
Well, listen, mate, pleasure chatting with you today. I appreciate it. And maybe one day on the channel we'll review some true crime shows or movies. It's we've done a crime podcast, which was a little bit more gangster influence and things like that, with
Oh
Heat
yeah.
and films like that. So check that out as well. We'd appreciate that. And yeah, hope you guys are all safe and well. Your family and friends are all safe and well. And stay tuned next week where we're doing Callum's report as well. So I hope you
Where
guys are all well.
Matthew has already guessed in advance what I'm talking about.
I don't know much about this one, to be fair. I know absolutely
Yeah.
nothing about it, so it's going to be a fun one. I'm actually really, really excited for it. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy these little different videos. We're trying to switch things up as well for you. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. Take care, and bye bye.
Bye bye.